Saint Matthew. Saint Matthew. Chapter 1. Saint Matthew's Gospel opens with the words, "The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham." It gives us a genealogy commencing from Abraham, reaching to Joseph, the husband of Mary. It divides Jewish history into 3 periods of 14 generations each. It tells us that Joseph was espoused to Mary, and that before they came together, she was found with child by the Holy Ghost. It tells us that herein were fulfilled the words, "A virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel." It tells us that the child, when he was brought forth, was called Jesus. There are here some obvious difficulties which all readers have felt and which cannot be evaded. I will enumerate them. Jesus Christ is said to be the son of David and the son of Abraham. So far we have the announcement which might be expected from a Jew who believed that the Messiah was to be of the race of the great patriarch and the great king. But how is he proved to be so? Joseph is shown to be of that race, but Joseph is declared not to be his father. Secondly, what has the arrangement of Jewish history into periods to do with the genealogy or with the account of the conception? Thirdly, supposing the miraculous conception admitted, how was it a fulfillment of the words of Isaiah, who evidently speaks of a child then about to be born, who should not be able to cry, "My father or my mother," before the 2 kings who were conspiring against Ahaz should have been put down? It does not seem to me that we escape from these difficulties by supposing the first 2 chapters of St. Matthew not to be a genuine part of his gospel. For we should still have to explain how a story so apparently inconsistent was put together. Nor do I see how we are helped by supposing him to be an Ebionite Christian. For though a portion of the Ebionites believed in the miraculous conception, it does not seem to have been a characteristic tenet of theirs, and the inconsistency will remain the same. Or if we suppose it to be portions of 2 narratives put together by some later compiler, it is quite unintelligible why he did not omit the genealogy or try to accommodate it to the account of the conception. Suppose, on the other hand, that St. Matthew set out from the belief, which I have shown to be common to all the evangelists, that Jesus was the eternal Son of God. Would it seem to him strange that his incarnation should take place in what we call a miraculous way? Might it not seem to him, if I may use the expression, the most natural way in which such a person could be brought into this world? Might he not look upon this birth as rather explaining the law of other births than being merely an exception from them? And if he had this thought, would not all Jewish history seem to confirm it to him? Take, for instance, the first in his genealogy. The birth of Isaac surely intimated to Abraham, and through Abraham to the Jewish nation, that a child is the gift of God, that where there is a human father, it is still to be attributed to him as its author. With this first example to start from, must not the whole line of Jewish children have been regarded as witnesses of a mysterious divine paternity over the nation and over its different members? Did not every page of the prophets suggest the thought that human relations had a divine counterpart, that they were grounded upon a relation which was most real, but which had not yet been manifested? If this were his feeling, would it be strange that he should deduce his genealogy to Joseph instead of to Mary? Would not the sudden interruption of the history just at that point be the clearest explanation of the previous sequence, denoting that now the meaning of it was declared, that the ground of these human relations was brought to light? The words, "Son of David, son of Abraham," would then stand in close and intelligible connection with the latter part of the story. They would intimate that the Son of God was that heir of David's throne of whom all the previous kings had been testifying, under whom they had been reigning, that the covenant with Abraham was accomplished in him, for that in him all the families of the earth were to be blessed. Upon this hypothesis, we might easily explain why Matthew should dwell, though but for a moment, upon the successive periods of Jewish history. He who had come to gather up the history of the people, he who was to be the center of the different ages, is about to present himself to us. A writer could not more significantly intimate than in this way what was to be the subject of his narrative, how the past was to be fulfilled in him. I have used the word fulfilled in anticipation of the next passage in the chapter. Undoubtedly one who was a virgin at the time when Isaiah spoke to Ahaz, conceived and bore a son, as we are told distinctly that the prophetess did in the 8th chapter. I apprehend that St. Matthew, so far from overlooking this fact, or its connection with the other events which befell Ahaz and the land of Israel, is especially desirous to remind us of them. He wishes us to recollect that Ahaz showed utter faithlessness in God's covenant, and that since he did so, the Lord himself promised to give a sign which should show that the accomplishment of the promises to the house of David stood not in his faithfulness, nor in the faithfulness of that house. The sign to Ahaz that his land would be preserved, and that Samaria and Syria would be destroyed, was given. There was no disappointment, no trafficking with words in a double sense, no indefinite postponement of that which the prophet declared would be immediate. But the meaning of the sign was not fulfilled, could not be fulfilled, unless a perfect king should actually be given to David's house, unless that king should be the Son of God. The sign itself was accomplished precisely in the sense in which it must have been understood, not by any departure from the ordinary rule of conception and birth, though the prophet felt that he and his children were, from their very calling, signs and wonders of the Lord of hosts. But when the intention was completely fulfilled, it was necessary that the sign itself should be fulfilled by an extraordinary indeed, but as I have dared to say, by the most natural method in which so divine and yet so human a fact could take place.